Hey everybody, welcome to Humble Ground. This is a project I've wanted to do for a long time, and I've been talking about it with the guy to my left for a long time, and so I told him if I ever did get up off the ground, he was going to be the first person I call, and today's the day. We want to tell stories of men and women in the ag industry that bring food to your table, because I think there's not enough light shining on all of those people. This is kind of a good way. So without further ado, Mr. Andy Evans with Rockin' E Cattle Co.
Tim, great to be here, buddy.
Yeah.
Great to finally see this take off and get it up off the ground. I'm excited not only for you but for everybody else that gets to be involved in this.
Sure. No, it's one of those things. We get to travel, I would say now on a weekly basis almost, to every state across the country, West Coast to East Coast, North and South, and we get to see ag everywhere. And so we get to tell all these great stories for our clients, which is awesome, but there's so many more stories to tell, and there's so many more people to honestly just meet with like you. First generation farms, that safe to say?
Yep.
When did it start, and I guess, did you come from a farming background? Where'd you start at?
So my family, I came from an agricultural family, not on the farm side. We grew up in the equipment side. I've got 4 brothers, 2 sisters, lots of nieces and nephews. All of my brothers, myself, my sisters, we're all included in mom and dad's implement dealership. It's been in the family business for 60 years.
Incredible.
I mean, it really is incredible. It's something to be super proud of when you can say that it's been in your family for 60 plus years. Not many people can say that it has never switched hands. Dad started it and he's still running it today at the age of 85. He just won't give up, Tim. He just won't give up, which is good. It keeps him going every day, because if he had to stay at home with mom, I don't know if they'd be married anymore.
Sure. No, and I think that's right. I think that sums up agriculture, honestly.
Yes.
There are so many businesses or family operations that have been around forever, you know, so 60 years is truly incredible. I hadn't realized it had been that long. I grew up not far from Andy, so I've drove by the implement dealership my entire life, you know. But again, that's not double my age, but pretty close to double my age. And so that's quite an accomplishment. So how'd you get to where you had cattle, and where'd that kind of take off at?
So at a young age, I was in 3rd grade, probably 2nd grade, 3rd grade. All my friends were in 4-H. My best friend, his dad owned the vet clinic in town. And so I grew up around cattle, hogs. On Saturdays, they used to buy hogs at the old sale barn in town. And so on Saturday mornings, I'd go up and I'd push hogs for the order buyer, me and Brett, back to the barn. And it was an every Saturday deal. I made $5 a Saturday. And I thought I was just really, getting rich at a young age.
Why not? Yeah.
And I built my love for livestock. I really did. I got involved in 4-H. I was a big advocate for 4-H, still am. I really love seeing the kids' projects, working with them in the summertime at the fair. It really warms my heart to see the younger generation get involved in agriculture. And that is really probably where I took my liking and my love for livestock. I started out as a bucket calf, doing bucket calf woodworking. As I got a little older, I figured out I did not like the woodworking projects. Being a carpenter was not my cup of tea.
Sure.
Not you either love it or you hate it type deal.
100%.
I hated it.
Yeah.
Most definitely. But on the bucket calf side of things, so I was little, started out there. And then I decided once I got my feet wet, I'm like, I want to show steer and a heifer too. Then we went and I took my bucket calf from the previous year because it was tame.
Yep.
Okay. Already halter broke. Well, then I wanted to show heifer too. So I wanted a fancy heifer. Went down to Centralia, bought a registered shorthorn heifer. All had lots of genetics behind her, with the intent of keeping her, making a cow out of her. Showed her, got reserve champion with her. Then I had a guy come along that wanted to buy her. Well, then I'm like, hey, I'm going to make some money on this. This is,
definitely,
young kid. You're like, oh, money. Hey, but I had to pay mom and dad back for the heifer.
Right.
But I got to keep the rest. Mom and dad has always taught all of us boys and girls in my family that if you want it, you got to earn it.
Sure.
It don't come free. Nothing's given to you. And hard work will get it, but you've got to earn it. And so I guess that's where I got my grit and my determination that, you know, hey, if I want to do this, you got to chase after it.
Definitely.
You know, it's kind of like the Cody Johnson song. You got to chase after the dream because the dream isn't going to chase you.
That's a perfect way to put it.
I mean, and that's
and a lot of people are afraid to. A lot of people are afraid to chase the dream realistically.
Absolutely. So from there on, I got into high school. When I hit 6th grade, junior high, bought my first horse as a 2-year-old. My good friend Matt Cook, back in the day, went and started my kind of the horse deal. So I bought a 2-year-old. It was a learning project for me. Dad always had horses growing up, but he was into the driving horses, into the Morgans, you know, things like that. I kind of wanted a different route. I wanted more into the cattle side. I wanted a working horse. So I bought this 2-year-old, started working with her, got her broke, showed her the first year in halter because she wasn't broke yet fairly well. My first year, I thought. And then the second year went into all the other different classes that you could. And then after that, then the plaques started coming in. Had a chance we could go to state. I could have went to state every year with her. It was just that really made me feel humbled because it showed, I spent more time with that horse than I spent with probably anybody.
Sure.
At that age. And then started doing a little roping off of her, doing different things. As I got into high school, I went to work for Nemaha Valley Aerial at Centralia, Kansas, my freshman year. Just kind of a yard guy. I was in high school, so I couldn't do a lot. I knew I wanted away from the implement dealership because mom and dad more or less said that you need to go to work for somebody else. I couldn't agree more. I think that every kid needs to go work for somebody else for a little while to teach them responsibility. Because working for your mom and dad, I mean, come on.
There's a lot of flexibility there.
A lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot. I mean, it teaches you respect. It teaches you to work with others. There's just a lot of things that it teaches you. Fast forward to my senior year. That is where probably my life really took a turn. Went to work for the guy by the name of Travis Stuckey, who I thought was just going to be a summer job before I left for school. Turns out I went to school. Well, I left on wheat harvest late that summer when it started around home, driving a truck for dad because it was just on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to do.
Sure.
Always had the passion for trucks, loved trucks.
Would have never
obviously.
guessed. Yeah.
But right or wrong, my brothers hates them because they got to be in them every day. I don't. But it's just one of them things that it was on my bucket list and I wanted to do it. So I went and did that. Then went to school. Went to school for 2 years. And believe it or not, I actually went into electrical technology and design. And got a associate's degree in business. At the time I thought, I can farm, run cattle,
Yeah.
and do this as my full-time job. So I came back home from school, went and did that for a year, and figured out it wasn't for me. It just wasn't what I loved.
Sure. You got to do that though.
I mean, you've been there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think everybody has at some point in their life.
Yeah.
You go do something, and that's a lot of these kids go to school, to college. I was lucky enough, I went to Votech school, so I still use it to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think a lot of kids think they have to go to college and get that 4-year degree
Sure.
to make them to maybe please their parents, please
Right.
themselves.
Yeah.
And that's great if that's what you truly want to do.
Definitely.
I knew myself, there was no way I was making it through 4 years of college.
I went 2 years, technically, 2 different schools. Politely asked me to leave both of those schools. I occasionally use it. My background's actually in software development, surprisingly enough. I guess I don't come across as the typical developer, which is no knock to anybody. But if you've met developers, most of them want to be locked away and don't want to be, in the public eye. And I guess I don't mind talking to people. But I think you're right. I think, back when I went to school and probably when you went to school, it was more this, you need to get away and you need to do this and you need to do this. And now it's becoming a thing. We just did a project for a tech college in Kansas multiple tech colleges actually, and it was so neat to see the programs they have that where they can do that in high school now. So yeah, you can get that degree or that certificate or whatever it is you want and go straight to work and honestly make good money. A lot of them are moving back to the farm. I don't blame you. You know,
I mean,
it's about finding what you love, I think.
When I graduated high school, well, my junior year, mom and dad, not so much dad, more mom. Mom was the one that was like, you're going to school and it don't matter, you're going.
Definitely.
And so we got into an argument one day, and I said, well, none of the rest of my siblings went to school other than one, maybe two. And I said, why can't I just go be like my older two brothers right above me? I said, they're driving a truck. They got their own trucks. They're making good money. I said, that's what I want to go do. That's my love. I've always had that love.
Sure.
You know, I am so glad though that I didn't. I mean, I went and did it for a couple years. It was fun.
Yeah.
You know, got my feet wet. I still love doing it,
Yeah.
but it's even better when you don't have to do it every day, especially in today's world. It's people, But so after that, I came back home, did electrical for a year, a little over a year, worked through the major worst ice storm, I think possible that I think we've probably ever had that I can remember.
Definitely.
In 2008, I believe
Would have
it
been
was.
right around there. Yeah, 7 or 8. Had to been.
I think it was right around 7, 8, somewhere in there. Learned a lot. That was,
You definitely would have learned a lot during that time. Yeah.
but that was shortly after that. That's when I discovered that my heart just wasn't in it.
So you decided to get out of electrical and the freezing stuff and get into cattle, which is even
Well,
more out in the
I went to driving a truck back to driving a truck
cool.
full time.
Yep.
For 2 years. And I was feeding cattle already. As soon as I came back home from school, I had a place rented that would hold about 100, 120 head. Renting a couple pens,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't own any equipment, you know, I owned a house in town, but I enjoyed doing it. After I quit the electrical, Travis and Brandy came to me because Travis was a great family friend of my family's and with my brother, Matt, and myself. I grew up with Travis at our house. So he was more like a big brother, you know, but he came and wanted to offer me a job managing the chemical warehouse. He owned, at the time, it was Frontier Chemical. And I had worked for him that summer before I left to go to college. And I loved it. I loved the sales side of it. I loved dealing with the customers. And it was just fun. You know, it was like you get up every morning, it's like, I'm excited to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, in the ag industry. So once again, it goes back to my whole life has been in the ag industry and the livestock side. So I worked for Travis and Brandy for altogether, it was 11 years
Wow.
that I was there. And in them 11 years, where our home feed yard is, that it sat on a quarter section. And I was young. I was 23, 24. I couldn't swing buying
Sure.
160 acres.
Even back then, I would
Yeah.
imagine that was still a chunk of money.
It was still a
Huge chunk of money today. But
Yes.
at least where we're from. But
Yes.
how much was it back then? You remember?
I think that farm was 6,000, just short of 6,000 an acre.
And it's what, pushing double that now?
Oh, not
Probably.
quite double, but probably
10?
a quarter more.
Yeah.
I mean, between that and 9.
Yeah. How'd you make it work financially?
So there was a house, a nice house that sat on it,
Yeah.
buildings, and it was on a silent auction, I guess you could say. You had
Yeah.
to mail your bids in, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, cool.
I talked to Travis about it. And because he has a farm that butted up to it on the north side, or on the south side, excuse me. And I said, hey, we ought to buy this quarter together and split it. I said, I want the house and the buildings.
Right.
And you can have the rest of the farm ground, give me X amount of acres, sell me X amount of acres out of it. And so we kind of, at first he's like, nah, this ain't no. Mm-mm. So we talked, we started, it really became serious a few days later. And he's like, we need to talk about this. I'm like, okay. So we sat down and we talked about it. And we went for a drive one night after work. And we went up there and looked at it and went through the house, went through the buildings. And then we went back to the drawing board and started putting prices together, putting values on everything.
Gotta
like
do that.
valued the house. Every building that was on that property, we put a value on. If you're going to buy it, you dang well better make sure that you put a value on everything. So in the end, you
Right.
can say, all right, well, I didn't overpay for it, but I gave what it was worth.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So we bought, after we ended up getting the high bid on it, Travis got it bought. We started out with 26 acres is what we started out with. I started out with the house and all the buildings. And I'm here to tell you, Tim, you know my place. There was not a single thing there but buildings and a house.
Really?
Nothing. We hauled 2-3 semi-loads of scrap iron out of that place. I mean, there was
Was it abandoned when you got it?
no.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
There was a family living there. It was their family farm.
But all the pins and everything's all, you guys did all that?
Yes.
Gotcha. I, for some reason, thought some of that was
Every
already existing.
stitch of pipe fence, every post,
Really?
every
man.
weld on that farm, we have done. Every bunk line, every ounce of concrete for the bunk lines, the watering aprons, all the water lines. I mean, we've done it all. We have completely redone everything on
Oh, it
that
looks
place.
incredible. Looks incredible. When you started and you got to 26 acres, was there a number in mind in your head that I'm gonna have 500 or 1,000 or when back then? Do you remember what that was like?
Oh yeah.
Well, I guess what your goal was when you bought it.
So when we bought the farm, I thought I'm just gonna feed for myself, be able to run 400 head, work a full-time job,
Right.
run my 450, 500 head, and do what everybody does, because at the time, let's just admit agriculture was not that good.
When would that have been? By the time you actually
20
started, when
20, we would have bought it in 2012, bought that place in 2012.
Okay. Yeah. Not super great. No.
No.
I
And-
want to say, I'm trying to think when I bought into, been a little bit after that, but it wasn't super great then either.
So bought the place in 2012. Then we fast forward that summer. We spent all that summer cleaning everything up, trying to get just a couple little pens built so I could add an extra 150 cattle to the ones I already had at the other place. We're rolling through summer. Everything's going good. Get to late August. I drove part-time still on the weekends for Hamish Trucking, hauling wet feed. Mm-hmm. I remember it very clearly. It was Saturday after lunch. I had just unloaded west of Seneca, and I was going back over to the plant to get another load. Because usually, weekend you do 2-3 loads a day.
Right.
And they were all local stuff right here close to home. And I remember sitting in the seat of that truck, and I couldn't get comfortable. Like, what is going on? It hit me all of a sudden that day.
Wow.
And it's like, something don't feel right.
Right.
So I called my wife and I said, hey, when your brother-in-law had his cancer, I said, what were some of the symptoms? And automatically, we were not married yet at that time.
Oh, okay.
We
Yep.
we weren't married yet.
Yep.
We'd been dating for 7 years. So she was 6 years at that time.
And she'd put up with you that long at that point.
Yeah.
She's committed at that
She
point.
was done committed. I mean, there was nowhere for her to go. She had her chance to run just like me, I guess.
She couldn't get away from you. I understand it.
So she's like, why? I said, oh, not trying to scare her, freak her out, but I said, I just can't get comfortable. So later on, get home. She goes, you need to go to the doctor right away on Monday. Okay. End of August, Monday, right before Labor Day. And I go into the doctor on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, and meet with the doctor. And she's like, we need you to do a sonogram. I'm like, I'm not having a baby. I don't, why do I need a sonogram?
What do I need this for? Yeah.
I go do my sonogram and whatever. And you could just tell that something was not right by the look
man.
on the tech's face. You know, they're not supposed to tell you. They can't tell you
Sure,
nothing.
but
You know,
you can
but
read
you
a room.
can-
Oh yeah.
If you can read a room, you could read that face like, I mean, just easy peasy. And at that moment, that's when I knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
So I left, went to mom and dad's shop that day because mom was worried. She's worried probably more than I was.
Right.
I mean,
well, don't blame her.
and they told us that they had to send that down to KU Med or wherever. And so later on that afternoon, I remember getting a phone call asking if I could come up to the hospital. I said, yeah, I'll be right there.
That's how you know it isn't good.
That's
Yeah,
when
they
you
can't
know it
deliver
isn't
over
good.
the phone. Yeah.
And we go up to the hospital and they're like, go back into the room, and they pull out some chairs, and you're like, oh God, this really is not good. This is not what I was planning for. And so we sit down and they're like, you have testicular cancer. Okay, now keep in mind, we bought the house and I bought the farm in February, March.
What, 6 months after that?
6 months
Holy
after
smokes.
this, trying to build what I had a vision of. And at that time, it felt like the legs of your chair were completely kicked out from under you.
Can't even imagine.
23, 24 years old, trying to do this on your own. And then you get a diagnosis of that. You know, there's a lot worse diagnosis, but at the time,
That's pretty high up there, though.
I mean, at the time, it was one of them that you didn't know what to do. Do you keep going? Do you stop? Do you just throw your hands in the air and go, what do I do now? We went to that Monday or Tuesday after Labor Day. We went to KU Med. Met with my doctor down there, Dr. Mirza. Awesome doctor.
Oh,
Love
good,
him.
good.
Love him to death. He is, but met with him and he goes, we're going to do surgery next Tuesday or whatever it was. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we are going through the motions in there, talking about this, talking about that. That week goes by and I'm stressed to the gills. You have a mental breakdown because you don't know what to do. Went in, did my first surgery where they took out one testicle, biopsied it, and by the grace of God, I don't know who was my angel that day, but it was stage 1B, but it was a very aggressive, growing, fast cancer. I got lucky somehow, I don't know. I think I know who my angel was, but my guardian angel that day, and thanks to my wife and my brother-in-law and my family for persuading me to go to the hospital, because most generally, you know how us
20-year-old.
guys are.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it'll go away. So went through that surgery. Then there was a month of in between here where they had to wait for everything to come back, see what it was. Went back. I was going to do chemo because the big surgery where they cut you open from top to bottom, pull all your organs out to take your lymph nodes out of your spine that lay in between your spine.
Gotcha.
I really didn't want that to happen. I'd never had surgery before. I was scared of knives. I was scared of needles. Heck, when they were trying to take my blood test at the hospital, I passed out.
I know a lot of people like that.
I
don't like needles.
Oh, I
Yeah,
hated
so
needles.
I can only imagine.
Now I do it like a pro.
Oh.
I just
Doesn't bother you.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. So decided that we were going to do the chemo route. Thought that was a better option. Went to Topeka because we don't want to drive all the way to Kansas City. So went to Topeka to do chemo, met with a doctor, did not like him. Didn't clash. Didn't get along.
Can't win them all, man.
No. So I walked out of there with my wife still sitting in the chair
geez.
in the room with the doctor because I was like, I'm done with this. I got up and walked out.
Yikes.
Here she comes running out. Where are you going? I'm going home. I don't know where you're going, but I'm going home.
This ain't working for me.
Yeah, this ain't working for me. So got in the car, started driving home, sent Dr. Mirza a text message saying, hey, we need to talk when you are free. Please call. He called, talked to our doctor in town, Dr. Beaker at the time, which was very great.
Yep.
She walked us, helped me through this more than probably
great.
anybody. And so we called her too. We got back together, ended up doing the surgery. That was where it was like, couldn't do nothing for 3 months. I mean, well, I did, but wasn't really supposed to. So went back. I was in the hospital for 6 days. Came back home. They finally kicked me out. Came back home. Laid around, got babysitted by my brothers. I felt like a 4-year-old having my brothers take turns.
I'm sure they loved it.
Oh, brother Radar, Matt, he came down and stayed with me. He just lives up the road from me, a half mile to the south.
Yep.
So he came down and sat with me when he was home, not in the truck, but he'd come down and check on me so Mel could go to work or mom could go back home.
Joy of family, man.
Whatever.
You know.
My brother Steve, he came up, sat with me for a while. They'd all take turns. It was pretty good. Always made me laugh, which hurt like a son of a gun. I mean,
Can only imagine that probably didn't feel too good.
oh, that hurt.
I've been around you guys enough to know there's a lot of laughs go around.
But so in that time, I realized I had a lot of great friends, like friends that wanted to see your dream succeed.
Yeah.
And that's what it's, I mean, you got to have a good fighting side behind you. When the going gets tough, you got to have them people that will make you and, you know, just push you to get down and grit down and grab a hold and not give up.
Yeah.
And I think in agriculture, you have got to have that. I mean,
I don't know how you get by if you don't. I mean, realistically.
You don't have them people in your life to, you know, push you along when the going gets tough, when you want to give up. I mean, giving up's too easy. You can give up any day of the week. But I mean, if you truly want to do something, you've got to get down and you've got to grab a hold and you've got to hold on and just go for the ride. So after that surgery, I was still working for Travis and Brandy. Back to light office duty about 2 months later, answering the phone, doing what I could. I couldn't lift anything. Hell, I could hardly set myself up yet.
Right.
Got through all that. And my family, my friends helped build the pins that I had started
That's awesome.
in the meantime. So kind of got that finished, which was a great feeling. So when I finally got back on my feet about 6 months later, I called a good friend of mine, Jim Dollinghouse, said, "Hey, I'm ready for some cattle."
He's
Guys,
a
I'll
good
tell
guy to
you-
call.
I'll give you, he goes, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "I got one better." He said, "I've got like 60 heads standing at home, that little calves that I need you to start for me. You want me to feed them for you?" He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I always liked how your calves looked when you brought them to the sale barn." He goes, "I want you to start some for me." He said, "Let's."
Really?
So that's how my feed yard really got started, was because of Jimmy D. When I lived in town, Jim lived just down the street from my mom and dad. I used to mow his yard all the time.
Nice.
So I got to know Jim growing up, Jim and Kate. They weren't married yet, you know, but I used to mow his yard for a can of Skull back in the day. I always, you know, thought,
That's a pretty hot deal back in the
I
day.
mean, back in the day, I thought cutting a fat hog in the butt, you know. And as time went on, I realized the friendship that was built. When I was down and out, Jim was always calling, checking on me, you know, right there with Trav. And I worked for Ryan Hamas too. When I worked for Trav, I was split between Travis 6 months. I was with Travis through the spraying season, through March till the end of August. Then I went to work for Ryan Hamas, who owns Hamas Family Farms. So I got in on harvest, anhydrous season, you know, all that, and learned a lot. That's really, I mean, where I got between Travis and Ryan, I give them a lot of credit for my business skills. I mean, that I picked up from them.
Good ones to follow.
Yes,
for sure.
they were, I look up to them a lot. Unfortunately, Travis passed away in August 3rd of 2022 from brain cancer. That was hard.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, how long had you guys been? How long did you work for him? I guess at that point.
When Trav passed away, I wasn't working for him anymore, but he was my go-to. I mean, if I needed a answer on a business question, you know, of, hey, is this right or wrong? he was my guy. Him and Ryan, I still call Ryan a lot with dumb business ideas, questions like, what do you think of this? Whatever. But Travis just had that demeanor about him that he would weigh all the options out with you. He was that guy that, like, you got this, dude. He was like your personal support guy.
And when you're in business with yourself,
yes,
you got to have those. Yeah, It's not like you got 4 other partners that you can just bounce ideas with.
No. When we started that feed yard work feeding for Jim at 60 head, it was first 60 head. I thought I was, like had 60 head of his, had 100 head of mine. I thought, I don't know. Let's give it a whirl. I still work a full-time job. Well, then I went back to driving a truck locally full-time, and I had a couple hundred head at home. Well, then I started feeding for another guy that got my number from this guy. And then this guy got my number. I have never once advertised my feed yard. Never once. No advertising.
That's impressive to get to the size.
It has all been word of mouth.
But that's the industry too, though. I think ag industry is that way.
Yes, the ag industry is that way, good or bad. Bad news travels faster than good news.
100%.
We know that.
Yeah.
I was driving truck locally, and I did that for 2 years, and I stashed a lot of money away.
Yeah.
But
you need money to build a business, though.
Well, when I started, Tim, I lived in town. I had the house that I lived in, and then I bought the house next door, which was a rental house, which is really, I sold my house in town to buy the farm.
That's a gamble.
Hoping that this would work. I had a really nice motorcycle that was kind of my stress reliever. I sold that to buy a skid loader. When I started out, I had 3 pieces of equipment. I had a Kelly Ryan feed wagon that I gave $1,500 for that I bought off of a friend down by Randolph, Kansas. I had a 7040 Alice with a loader and a Gale skid loader, 5640 skid loader. 3 pieces of equipment and a manure spreader I bought on a farm sale, so 4. That's all I had. That is all I had. And loaded feed with the skid loader, tractor was on the feed wagon. I did that for 3 years.
We got to make do with what you got.
Yeah, you got to make do, and I think in the ag industry, I think everybody sees, the big flashy combines, the big flashy tractors out in the field. When you're starting out, you can't afford that. Them guys that are running that equipment have been farming for decades.
A lot easier to do that.
A lot easier when you've been in business for decades to be able to afford that than when you're starting out. And I didn't come from a family that had this all established.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a few, with dad owning the implement dealership, it kind of helped things a little bit.
But it wasn't like you're just going to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on tractors and all of that kind of stuff.
I mean, there was days where I was wondering where the hell my supper was going to come from when I was starting out.
What's been the hardest, other than cancer, obviously, what's been the hardest thing for you? Is it when, was that last year, 2 years ago, where it was 100 some degrees and you were losing?
Last year in August, so I guess to fill them in, we are now at a 3,000 head capacity in our feed yard. We have 2 yards.
You cow-calf?
And we got 100 head of cow-calves between what me and my wife own, and then I own some with my brother that we share custody of. So, when I started that, we started out with 26 acres. I bought more acres of where I live from Travis and Brandy. And then I got lucky enough to have a neighbor come to me and want to sell me an 80. That fits really good because it's right close to where my brother lives. It's right on the back side of the section from me. Created a little bit more land for us. I got a couple neighbors that raise feed for us that, as far as corn silage, we raise our own plus buy some. But we are now at a 2,800 to 3,000 between the locations that we have.
Is that the pinnacle? What's the next 5-10 years look like?
I would love to add another 2 to 2,500 head.
Really?
In the next 5 to 10 years. Me and my wife, the hard part for this is me and my wife don't have kids. So you really got to think, okay, I've got 3 great employees. My number one guy that's been with me for 7 years, he puts up with a lot some days, but
I would bet so.
I couldn't do it without him. I couldn't do it without my other 2. Garrett, Tanner, Caleb, thank you. They do so much for us.
No, I've met them. I mean, they're great.
They're great
Great
guys.
people. Great people.
I mean,
gosh,
you got to have a good crew. If you don't have a good crew, I mean, yeah, everybody has, a lot of these guys, everybody has kids, so they make their kids, help on the farm, whatever. I don't have that luxury. I rely on having good employees, and you have good employees if you take care of them. I guess that's kind of what Travis and Ryan instilled in me is if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of you. And that was one thing that Travis and Ryan always did. They always made sure you were taken care of. At the end of the day, end of the week, you'd put in a lot of hours. I mean, working for...
That's ag though.
Yeah,
I mean,
ag is about the hours. It's not, everybody says that agriculture is not measured in hours. It's measured in acres. The cattle side, I want to say that it's not measured in head. It's measured in hours. Kind of the opposite. Because if you have 500 head, you're still going to put a lot of time in. If you have 100 head, you're going to put your heart and soul into them animals because you either love it or you hate it. Type deal. I love it. There's been times that I really hated it. Don't get me wrong. I could name 14 into 15. That sucked, losing when the markets crashed. Too young to know a lot about. I was still learning the puts and the calls and the hedges and still learning that trend, but now I've got that down pretty well enough to, so that I can put protection on. In today's world, you have got to learn how to protect your investment like that. There's just so much volatility in the world that you can lose everything that you worked so hard for in the blink of an eye. With that being said, if somebody tells you you can't do something or thinks that you'll never succeed, if you try hard enough, you will succeed. When I started, Tim, I mean, you've known me a long time. I hit it pretty well. I had a great bank, and it takes a great bank to stand behind you.
You'd have to.
And I thank God.
Well, and great people too.
Yes.
I mean, especially, friends and family going through what you were going through on top of the employees you have. But back then, yeah, without people, it probably would have been pretty hard to get off the ground. And
back then, so we started out with them 200 head. Then pretty soon we were at 500 head, 600 head. And I was still working full time. Well, what made me quit my full-time job? This is what did it. I was driving down the road one day and had a customer, somebody that wanted to be my customer, that wanted to send cattle, called me and needed to know if I had room. I said, yeah. He goes, well, can I send them now? I'm like, well, I'm not going to be home. I'm gone. I can't be there to get everything done, whatever. I was gone the rest of the day and that night. And I'm like, I just can't take them. He goes, no, I understand. He goes, I appreciate your honesty. And I hung up the phone. Driving down the road, it hit me. I can do so much with this. Why am I sitting here in this truck when I can truly be doing what I love? It was a leap of faith, leap of hope, whatever you want to say.
Did you go home and tell your wife that?
I did. Actually, the next day, I worked all that afternoon and that night, and I got home that next morning out of the truck and went and did chores. And she was already at work, but she came home that night, and I said, hey, I've been thinking about something. I said, I want to quit my job. She looked at me.
Deer in the headlights?
Yeah, deer in the headlights look. She looked at me, turned around and goes, why? She goes, I thought you liked doing it. I said, I do, but I said, I love what's outside more. I said, we could take this thing and grow this. I said, I know we can. I said, there's going to be some hard times. There's going to be a lot of good times, but there's probably going to be more bad times starting out than good times, you know, and it takes a good spouse to stand by your side when money gets tight. Money gets tight. Things don't always go as planned. Sometimes you got to change your plans. You don't get to go. You don't get to go.
Give up.
Yeah, you don't get to go golfing every weekend. You don't get to go
Just stab at me.
Yeah, a little bit. So you don't get to, you don't get to go to the lake. You don't get to go hang out with your buddies at the tavern in town. You don't get to go ride your ATVs, whatever, side by sides with all your buddies because you made a commitment. You made a commitment to your customers that you would put your heart and soul into giving your best care for their animals.
Right. And that's why they hired you.
Yes,
you don't,
exactly.
You don't want to go back on your word because,
no,
especially in ag, once you do that,
it
travels fast.
Yes, it is easier to ruin your name than it is to build it up. Than it is to build it up. You know, it's like I told her, we had a long conversation. I'm like, and we thought about it really hard for a month. And the marbles were just rolling around in my head. So I started calling people, connections that I made through other people in the cattle industry, and started picking their brain. I'm like, hey, if I did this, what do you think? And they're like, well, I'd send you cattle. Your honesty, your integrity, you've always done what you said you were going to do. And that's another thing is I have learned that honesty, integrity, be honest with people. Do what you say you are going to do.
Simple concept. But many people overlook it.
Tim, it is so hard for people to do that in today's world. I mean,
it's getting worse and worse too.
Yes. If somebody gives you their word, I'm still the old, I guess, look you in the eye, solid handshake guy.
I am too. It's burned me a few times, and I'm sure you've been burned by it.
Yep.
But I think we grew up that way, and so it's really hard to shake the.
Yes.
People won't screw us over.
Yeah.
They will.
I think they can read right through us. Like, oh, this is one of the old-fashioned guys.
This guy, we're gonna pull one over on him.
He's a sucker.
Got a little bit more time. I got two questions that are have been burning in my mind this whole time. Again, appreciate you talking, and I'm sure we'll talk more. I'm always going to ask this. Obviously, you love what you do. I think you and I have talked about this before. People don't have an idea of where their food comes from. Like, everybody eats, but most people don't have any idea of
absolutely not
how hard it is to get beef to the table, or how hard it is to get lettuce from Southern California to Wisconsin. Like, most people don't see that, and we're fortunate. Big shout out to Kev. Kev's off camera here. Kev gets to travel with me across the country. Just started 6 months ago, maybe. We get to see ag production, livestock, you name it, row crops, specialty crops.
See a lot. I kind of want to jump in your guys' suitcase and just go with you.
Go with us anytime. I've told that to numerous people. I said, and of course, the one goes, well, I want to go to potato harvest. I'm like, well, that's the same time as corn harvest, so that's not gonna, once you retire, maybe. But what we see is most people have no clue. Like, what started a lot of this was two things. One, your video that we'll talk about here in a second, and a video I posted about potato harvest in Idaho last fall. And I had more questions about, well, how do they do this, and where do they store them, and do they sell them that day? And there were so many different questions. It's like, man, even people that farm don't know how potatoes get to the table. And potatoes, I would assume, have to be a top 3, if not number 1, consumed food in the world.
I think everybody eats potatoes.
McDonald's French fries are the biggest item in the world. And they were like, well, can you tell me about this and tell me about this? And I'm like, man, there's so much. So that's the whole goal of this, is to be, honestly, just meet good people, which we're already doing, but talk about ag, not only for people that farm and ranch, but for people that want to know more about that. And so what sparked that conversation, I used to have a buddy, he went to Las Vegas there's a big grain show out in Las Vegas. And he was sitting at a bar after the day, and you know who I'm talking about?
Nope, but I have a similar situation sitting in Nashville at the bar.
Yeah, and there's a lady that came up to him, and he must have had a ag looking logo on his polo. I'm not going to say what his name is, and she's just like, I just don't get it. And he's like, it was loud in there, music was playing. He's like, you just don't get what? And he goes, I just don't get why farmers farm. He goes, well, what do you mean? Why don't you just go to the grocery store and get it there? Why go into all the work of raising livestock or growing crops when you could just go get it at the grocery store? And he came back and he's like, Tim, I've never in my life she honestly thought that was like, why would you waste your time doing that? So what's your thought on that? And it's not a bash on people. Honestly, there's a lot of people.
There's just a lot of uneducated people, because you go to the cities, there's a lot of them that, when they travel, it's the interstate or by plane.
Right. So they never get to see rural America.
Yeah. If they live in New York, I mean, we're in the Midwest. We know what farming is. We know what agriculture is. But the people in the big cities, they think you just go to the store. They don't realize that hamburger that they have in their hamburger helper came from a feedlot somewhere.
Right.
It started out as a calf from like a cow-calf operation. It has to go through a growing phase. Then it goes, once it becomes X amount so old, so big, it goes into what we call a fat yard or a finishing yard to get finished for slaughter. Once it is fed up to X amount of pounds, every calf's different, yearlings, calves, whatever. It's all different. Everyone, it's kind of like a human. There's no one that is identical. I mean,
it's a good way to put it.
I mean, they all have different finish weights. They all yield different. They all have a different carcass data, whatever. Some go prime, some go CAB, some go choice, and some go select. When you take them to the packer, that's the USDA. They inspect them. So they make sure that we have the healthiest, safest food chain in America that we can have.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's so much as one that has, an abscess, and it's that you can't see or something, they'll tank it. It could be cancer. It could be, they don't want to take that risk. So
when you're talking about the food chain, that's one can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Look at the mad cow disease. What happened with that? I mean, totally ruined the market for a while, but
I'm going to give your place a plug here as you're growing. So Andy doesn't have a website. I've given him enough crap about that, so I'm not going to give him too much crap.
I will, I promise.
A couple different ways you can help Andy out. Honestly, if you're looking into somebody that needs to feed, Andy also makes bunks, does quite a few concrete things there. Andy also has beef, some of the greatest beef in the world, in my opinion. I've had it. We raise our own too, but Andy's bailed us out numerous times when we couldn't get a spot in the locker or we needed some beef just to get us through. I know a bunch of people that buy from him. I've told him, again, he needs to get a website and sell off the farm beef. He can ship it all over the place. What's that one thing you said, like Christmas? Every year you ship it to like 20 different states or something like that?
Oh, every Christmas I think we ship, I want to say like 75 coolers.
Was it like a Christmas gift?
It was a Christmas gift deal that a company did, and we had done it every year, and it just keeps growing. And now they call the people that get it.
Oh, wanting beef?
Wanting beef. Wanting steaks.
Off the farm beef's a whole different thing than what you find in the store, and we're not going to get into that. But
maybe on another episode down the way.
Yeah, but no, check him out. I will put a link to his Facebook page, his email address. You're not going to find better people than Andy and Melissa, again, in the crew that they have and the business they've built. If you've been watching this whole time or listening to this whole time, you'll probably realize that Andy is the only person I know personally that's went viral. Andy and I last December, I think it was last December or January, all my shoots had been canceled. Again, we travel the country and film for ag clients. In a nutshell is what we do. And so I said, Andy, can I come follow along with you for one day? And I think your answer was, it's going to be like negative 27 degree wind chill.
Negative 27, I think, that morning.
Yeah. And I said, that'll be fine, man. I can't wear gloves when you film because there's not very many gloves at work.
It was miserable.
And so I said, I just want to film and show people what it actually takes to honestly keep cattle alive in the wintertime. So we get done, and Andy's got just his beard's frozen. It's icicles hanging off. I said, man, I'm going to put a camera on you and get your real thoughts after, again, we're freezing. My hands are just sitting here shaking. Like the video is not very stable, but it is what it is. And I said, man, give us your thoughts. And if you know Andy, and if you've listened to this, you know that he jokes around a lot. And he goes, well, we don't work this hard to put ketchup on your steaks or something. And so I was like, man, that's a perfect little piece to put out into the world. Didn't think nothing of it. I go to it was right around my birthday, I feel like. So I don't know if I went out to supper for my birthday or something. Anyways, come back home and my phone, like, you know how the notifications you just sit there?
Yep. Ding,
I was
ding,
like,
ding, 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 ding.
man, what did I post that would have been that, and like lightning in a bottle, man. It was just likes and comments and shares and whatever. And I'm getting people that text and like, man, that was hilarious. And I'm like, okay. So then I let it go, like wake up the next morning and it's got like, I posted it later on, probably had 100, 200,000 views. And I'm like, that ain't bad,
Cool.
So I text Andy. I'm like, oh man, you're on your way to stardom.
Working on my next gig.
Yeah, he was like, screw the feedlot. I'm going into acting. And I think it got to 1 million by the end of that first full day. And I texted him. I'm like, man, what's it like? And but as you read through the comments, I said, man, you got to check out some of the comments because it was either
they either liked it.
Yeah,
or
they either loved it and thought it was hilarious, or they commented or like, don't tell me what to do with my beef, this and this and this. And I'm like,
or you ought to be glad they're just buying beef.
yeah. And it's like, he's not saying they're not glad they're buying beef, man. He was just making a joke. He doesn't care what you put on it.
Just buy the beef and you can put whatever you want on it.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
So what, you were in Manhattan, Kansas
So I was in Manhattan, Kansas, loading some cattle out at the sale barn one night to bring back home. And I'm putting my boots on. I'm that guy that I crawl out of my truck, and if I'm loading, I put my muck boots on, I put coveralls on. I don't like my truck smelling like cow crap.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there putting my boots on by my toolbox of the truck, and I look over my shoulder and there's like 3 people in the alleyway standing there staring at me. I'm like, what are they looking at? It's like, I'm that guy that I'm always looking over my shoulder like, dude, do I got like, did I like drop something on me? What? And pretty soon they're like, hey, you're that ketchup guy. I'm like, ketchup guy. I'm like, you got to remember, this was like in springtime, like April.
Yeah.
We did that in December. We're in April now. And I'm like, ketchup guy. I'm like, yeah, I am, I guess. And like, that was funny, man. Like, good to meet you. I'm like, holy crap. So I had to text you. I think I texted you, said, holy shit.
I'm famous.
We really went viral, So yeah,
it's all real when people start to notice you.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
What we should have done is in January, got you at some trade show or something and signing autographs.
Started signing autographs. Yeah, most definitely. Got some shirts, the ketchup guy.
Yeah, the ketchup guy with your mug on him. We still should.
I'll bet
we'll do that and we'll put them on the website and then we can sell them and all the proceeds will go to Andy.
Actually, we take them proceeds and we donate it back to a charity.
Perfect.
So I love donating back to charities.
Well, be on the lookout. I'm gonna have Casey design something up, and we're gonna don't put ketchup on your steak, and it's gonna have a picture of you, and then we'll have one with Patrick Mahomes since he does put ketchup on his steak. A big X over his face or something.
That's probably why I'm not a big football guy.
That's probably why. But, anyways, I appreciate you coming on. I think we'll meet again. I'm sure
we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back. We shot for 30 minutes and we're double that, I think.
You can edit it.
We can edit it. We're not editing anything, man. You didn't cuss, which is surprising. But again, make sure to support his business. Go like him on Facebook, if nothing else. Again, buy some
cattle.
Yeah, Rocky Cattle Co. There's some really good pictures on there. I know a guy that took them. We got a lot of great guests coming up. A lot more good stories. Yeah, make sure to make sure to subscribe, leave us a review if you liked it. Thank you to Andy, and we'll see.
One thing I just want to say, to the people listening, if you have a dream that you really want to go after it. I mean, don't be scared. You live one life. Nobody else is going to live your life for you. I mean, maybe it's not a full-time gig, and that's okay. By all means, chase it. You've got one life to live and enjoy it because it's here and it's gone in the blink of an eye. So go after it. Chase that dream. Do what makes you happy.
Perfect way to end, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.